Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Witness, Woods, and Wedding by Tonya Kappes, narrated by Johanna Parker. Chapter 1. The thing about Kentucky weather was that it could go from 90 degrees to 50 within a whip of a breeze. It could be raining one minute, then snowing the next. And Mother Nature didn't factor the time of year, the season, or the social calendar into her decisions. How rude, I mumbled, referring to Mother Nature. I turned off the radio station after the weather person mentioned a storm brewing up in the west, which was unusual in Kentucky. Normally our storms blew up from the south, or even the north. Rarely did they come from the west. Then again, I did live in normal Kentucky, where nothing was normal. The town was located in the heart of the Daniel Boone National Forest, which was pretty as all get out. That was why I chose the fall, I reminded myself, putting out of my head the storm that was supposed to hit within the next 24 hours. I guess I don't expect anything different. I sighed and got off the interstate in Lexington, a couple of hours north of me. I was going to pick up a friend from the airport there. Kentucky was gorgeous in the fall. The famous Kentucky bluegrass was poppin', and the colors of the trees in the distance were nothing any famous artist could ever capture in paint. The unseasonably warm fall temperature was a sure sign something was brewing in the atmosphere, but it wasn't here yet. Pulling into the turning lane to make a left into the bluegrass airport, I rolled down my window and took a moment to enjoy the air. The sun was low, casting a golden glow that seemed to set the entire landscape on fire. What's that saying? I asked myself when I saw the red sky and the boater. Or was it the sailor? Whichever term was correct didn't matter. What mattered was the meaning, and I remembered it perfectly. Storms ahead. Forcing the thought out of my head, I focused not on the changing leaves of the trees by the Keeneland horse racing track beyond the stoplight, nor on the distant silhouette of the airport's control tower. I concentrated on the wildflowers. They stretched along the roadside, an unruly garden cared for by nature alone. The yellow and purple goldenrods waved like friendly hands as the cars zoomed past them. Black-eyed Susans peered up with dark, curious eyes, mixed in with asters that had begun to bloom, and then followed the orange and purple cosmos, those chaotic bursts of color that seemed to dance in the light breeze. I leaned closer to the window, almost pressing my nose to the glass, entranced by this display of natural artistry. It was a final farewell, a goodbye embrace from the land I loved. I could almost smell the flowers' fragrant blend, mixed with the earthy scent of fall. The honk behind me made me jump. "Sorry," I waved, knowing the driver of the car behind me wanted me to hurry through the turning signal light. My hands tightened around the steering wheel as I approached the airport's entrance, and a pang of worry hit me. I wondered if those beautiful wildflowers would withstand the big storm. I snorted as I pulled up to the curb and threw the old car in park before reaching for my phone to text, "Parked by pole 5 at baggage claim." My correspondent replied with a thumbs-up emoji to signal my text was received. I glanced in the rearview mirror, catching one last glimpse of the wildflowers, a palette of colors that seemed to blend together in perfect harmony. It was exactly what I had wanted for this week. Perfect harmony. Well, I'd settle for harmony by itself. Was that so much to ask for? Surprisingly, only a few minutes passed before she emerged, and with only one bag, a carry-on. "Hiya!" Violet Reinhammer yelled, waving her arm in the air. "What, no +1?" I gave a subtle chin lift and smile, glancing slightly behind her. Surely she had more than one carry-on, and her +1 was getting the suitcases. There had to be a +1, and everyone was excited to meet the man who had actually wanted to date Violet Reinhammer. "Hi!" I jumped out of the car and popped the trunk open so it was ready for all of her luggage. No doubt she had a whole suitcase just for makeup. I'd even cleaned out my trunk before I left normal so her stuff would fit. "How's the bride?" She squealed and tossed her arms around me. The carry-on thrashed against my back. "I'm great," I lied right through my teeth, letting go. Not Violet. She pushed me out to arm's length. Her eyes scanned my face, seeing right through me. "That's a bold-faced lie." Violet eyeballed me, her eyes narrowing slightly, a playful smirk on her lips. "Oh, I've got a hankering something is wrong." She snickered at her own joke. Get it? She started to explain when I didn't laugh. Hankerin', as in your soon-to-be husband, Hank. Oh, I get it, but Mother Nature doesn't play any sort of jokes, especially with the storm brewing. I forced a smile, though it didn't quite reach my eyes. But I'm happy you're here. Are you kiddin'? She put her hand to her chest, her eyes widening with faux surprise. I'm honored the bride is here to pick me up. Of course I am, I said, faking a smile, even though I knew that she knew that none of my friends were about to pick her up. Besides, I had a nice long chat with Mother Nature about the big day in less than 48 hours, and how she has to let the big storm blow over. That's all I'm asking for, I told myself as I threw Violet's carry-on suitcase in the back of the trunk and slammed it shut. One day. Oh, is that all? Violet chuckled and tossed her blonde hair over her shoulder, a flicker of amusement in her eyes. You know that's going to be a bit hard to do in Kentucky. I nodded, reluctantly agreeing with her. I know, but I'm not asking for the whole year, just the day. We exchanged a glance that wasn't full of hope. Both of us had endured Kentucky weather, and, well, let's just say that even asking for a full day during the brewing of a storm like they were predicting was probably too much. She laughed, the sound light and airy, full of mirth. I love Kentucky and all its unpredictability. Her eyes sparkled, reflecting my joy. Violet was here, and the wedding was happening. She took my hand and gave it a reassuring squeeze. With or without the storms, it's going to be perfect, she said with a real smile. Holiday Junction is having the storm now. If my flight was an hour later, I wouldn't be here. From what my colleagues at the Junction Journal are telling me, everything is shut down. She sat down in the passenger seat and buckled in. Colleagues? I asked, knowing she and her mama were the only employees at the Junction Journal. Now was a great time to change the subject, and it was about Violet. She could talk about herself for hours, and we had too until we got back to normal. Radley, she sighed with exhaustion. Radley is the newest employee. Don't ask. My internal alarm sounded. From the tone of her voice, there was more to Radley than she let on, but I let it slide, for now. What are we waiting on? She looked over at me, ever the chipper young woman with blonde hair neatly parted to the side and layered in loose curls, perfect white teeth, and a big smile. That grin used to cut me to my core when I saw her as the reporter for Channel 2 News, the Normal Gazette, and Good Day in the Park, her own show in Normal. Darren? I said, and leaned up a little so I could see if he was coming through the airport's sliding doors. He's not coming. She leaned back in her seat against the headrest as she sucked in a deep breath. He's in law school and has had very little time for me or anything else. Anything else as in your secret identities? Even now I was too scared to say the secret identity she and Darren Strickland had assumed in their small town, Holiday Junction. People thought Normal was nuts. I was here to say that I'd been to Holiday Junction, that that place was flat out crazy, and that Violet Reinhammer fit right in. No. Violet shook her head. Nothing. Law school, huh? I asked. It wasn't like Violet and I talked all the time. In fact, when she did live in Normal, which was all her life until she thought she was going to a big job interview because she truly believed that she was the next Barbara Walters, and still did to this day, we didn't talk much. Her plane made an emergency landing and stuck her in Holiday Junction, which she never left. With time and distance and my need to get some information about something, I'd put aside the differences I'd had with her and called in a favor. It was then that we'd forged a long-distance relationship that took even me by surprise. You could only imagine how my best friends, a group of women we called the Laundry Club ladies, were a smidgen taken aback when I told them I was going to spend New Year's Eve in Holiday Junction with Violet. Here we were today. Fast forward. Mother Nature being a pill. Unseasonable storms brewing. Right in time for my wedding. And that was why I thought Mother Nature was being rude. As we drove back toward Normal, the sun dipped lower, casting a magical glow over the wildflowers and landscape of my beloved Kentucky. My heart was full of hope, love, and the promise of new beginnings. In a couple of days, I would be Mrs. Hank Sharp, even though I was keeping my name. A story for another time altogether. Finally marrying the man I was intended for, meant my adventures were only starting, and I was ready to face whatever came next. Unfortunately, a ping in my gut told me that whatever came next was going to test our marriage before it even began. Chapter 2. "Look what the wind blew in!" Dottie Swaggart hollered out from the tiki hut at Happy Trails Campground, her bright red hair confined by pink sponge curlers, her lips pursed around a pleather cigarette holder. Her words were followed by a trail of smoke that danced in the gentle breeze, the same breeze that had been teasing the campers' awnings and making the cheerful little banners wave. A slight hint of unrest tingled in the air, an unsettling prelude to the impending storm. But for now, the skies were a radiant blue, a stark contrast to my growing anxiety. "Literally," Dottie finished, her hands abandoning their task of steadying the ladder Henry Bryant was perched on. She rushed toward me and Violet. Henry wobbled dangerously, his arms flailing as he struggled to affix the garland of wedding bells to the roof. "You can't just let go," he yelled, his voice competing with the soft flapping of the campers' awnings. The campground was nestled in the embrace of the Daniel Boone National Forest, a picturesque oasis of tranquility with a stunning lake at its heart. The swan paddle boats sat regally in the water, a clear mirror that reflected them. Around the lake, campers of all kinds made a charming semicircle. Fifth wheels, travel trailers, camper vans, and vintage trailers, each with their own personality and story. On the far side, the quaint bungalows for rent peeping through the foliage held so many warm and happy memories, especially for soon-to-be brides who would rent them for their bachelorette parties and even out-of-town guests if they were having their weddings in the Daniel Boone National Forest. "It's good to see you too, Dottie," Violet choked out, waving a hand in front of her face to dispel the lingering cigarette smoke, which seemed to have a mind of its own. Dottie's eyes twinkled mischievously as she gave Violet a welcoming embrace that was as complex as the wind's direction, mixing warmth with a touch of the old resentment. My eyes wandered over the campground, my heart swelling with love for this place I called home. Every rustle of the leaves in the towering trees, every gentle ripple on the lake's surface, sang a soothing melody. But beneath it all, I felt the faint drumbeat of the coming storm, a discordant note in an otherwise harmonious symphony. The forecast had been clear, and Mother Nature was known for her capriciousness, especially in Kentucky. From what Violet had mentioned, the storm was already hitting her home, which wasn't anywhere near Kentucky, and if my calculations were correct, the forecast that the storm would be here tomorrow night seemed about right. That would be the best, since my wedding was in 2 days. My eyes met Dottie's, the unspoken understanding passing between us. Tomorrow was the rehearsal dinner, a day that was supposed to be filled with joy and anticipation. Yet the storm's shadow loomed, casting a pall over the preparations. "Come on, you two," Dottie said in a softened voice, the cigarette momentarily forgotten. "Let's get you settled in. We've got a big day ahead." "While you two do that, nicely," I warned Dottie, "I'm going to go to my place and let Fifi out and get my binder." "There's a binder?" Violet rubbed her hands together, excitement in her eyes. "I swear, she needs Henry's wagon to carry that darn thing around in." Dottie put 2 feet of air between her hands to exaggerate the calendar-style planner I'd been using for all the things. "That's why we gotta hurry up and get this gal married. She'll be unable to walk down that pier on account of a broken back if that darn thing gets any bigger." "Oh, Dottie." Violet nestled her hands in the crook of Dottie's arm, the bright skies overhead reflecting in her eyes. "Show me to my bungalow." "We gave you the fanciest one." Dottie told a bold-faced lie, the mischievous glint in her eye hidden behind a plume of cigarette smoke. All the bungalows were pretty much the same, set on the far side of the lake, adorned with appliances and fixings. Now they all had heat and air conditioning units, a big upgrade from when I'd first come to Happy Trails, nestled in the beautiful Daniel Boone National Forest. I couldn't help but look over at the pier that jutted out into the lake, lined with swan paddle boats, as I started to walk down the gravel drive. The campers' awnings flapped slightly in the gentle breeze, the little banners waving cheerfully. The vehicles included fifth wheels, travel trailers, camper vans, and even a few vintage trailers with polished chrome and pastel colors. On that very dock where I was standing, Hank Sharp had come into my life. His big black car was getting up that gravel road. I could still hear the pinging up against the exterior of his car before it came to a screeching halt, the sound echoing off the distant trees. A plume of gravel dust surrounded us and mingled with the scent of autumn leaves. There I'd stood with Henry Bryant, looking at the nasty lake. The lake's appearance at the time was a far cry from how it looked today, the calm waters reflecting the bright, cloudless sky. "Do you think we're going to get that big storm?" One of the campground guests called out to me, taking me out of my memory, his voice cutting through the distant rustling of the leaves. "You never know about weather around here," I said, meandering over to the fire he and some other guests were sitting around, the flickering flames casting a warm glow on their faces. "Remember to go to the recreation building if the siren does go off." "That thing can withstand a tornado?" he asked, a worried look in his eyes. "It sure can. But tornadoes around here at this time of the year are really unlikely," I said, even though forecasters were predicting they could happen. The faint taste of an impending storm hung in the air. Most of the time, those types of weather patterns happen in the spring. The warmer-than-usual temperatures skittered across my cheek as the breeze whipped past me, telling me the area was experiencing exactly the type of weather that indicated tornadic activity. Plus, I'm still going to have my wedding here, so Mother Nature better cooperate. I gave a slight wave, excitement mixed with a touch of anxiety fluttering in my stomach. My sweet little yellow pop-top camper van was one that I couldn't stand, even after Stanley had taken my Maserati keys in exchange for the flamingo keychain with the tiny little camper key on it. After arriving at the campground and realizing it needed some work, I'd been bound and determined to sell the place so I could rush back to New York City, where I could get my life back. There was no better way to bide my time than watching YouTube videos and learning how to remodel a camper van. The one I had wasn't perfect and contained a lot of used furniture from the Tough Nickel, a local thrift shop, but it was mine. I'd made it very cute and decorated it mainly in the farmhouse style by nailing shiplap and painting the exterior, which made a nice little home for one. Not too long after that, Fifi, my little poodle, had entered my life, making the camper van a great place for two. The door of the camper van was fully extended, but the screen door was shut. I swore Fifi could hear my footsteps a mile away. She was yipping before I could see her. "Hey, little girl," I greeted her when she came into view. Her little tail wagged a mile a minute. "It's almost time for you to go get your wedding haircut so we can get married." I had marked this day in my calendar, not only to take Fifi to the smelly dog groomer, but to get my wedding dress and jewelry. Oh, and my marriage license, the most important thing. "And you are going to look so cute as a flower girl," I told an excited Fifi. Her nails clicked on the floor as I approached the door. As soon as I opened it, she bolted down the little step and shot out like a jet to make her afternoon rounds, which included seeing the other guests and getting scratches and possibly a piece of food from them. She also made sure she took her time to sniff every single inch of their car, trailer, or camper wheels. From my back pocket, my phone rang, and I pulled it out to see Hank was calling. "Are you calling to tell me you've changed your mind?" I asked, the smile growing on my face as I stepped inside the camper van. "Me? It's not me I'm worried about," he teased in a whisper, which sounded so sultry on the other end of the phone. I knew he didn't make it sound that way deliberately, because he was with the family of a missing teenager this morning. She'd been missing for a few months now, and he'd been working the case ever since they hired the private investigation service run by him and his partner, Jerry Truman. "I'm all good. Violet Reinhammer is here now, so I have to go through with it." I joked back and ran my left hand over the top of the wedding binder I'd put together. The sparkly diamond from the engagement ring reminded me that I also had to stop by the jeweler to get gifts for the bridesmaids. I have a lot to do. I have to get Fifi and Chester groomed before I head over to see Lynn Dunbar. I flipped open the binder and looked at today's date, ready to start checking off the tasks. The only one I'd done so far was picking Violet up at the airport. "Uh-oh," Hank laughed. "I hear the binder opening." Stop it, I spat out and ran my finger along the side tabs that read Wedding Week. I have to pick up the final dress from Betts. Betts Hager, owner of the Laundry Club Laundromat, a member of the Laundry Club Ladies, and bridesmaid, offered all things, including a seamstress. She wasn't the seamstress, though. Someone else in town was, and she worked with Betts to get things to her. Today was the day I would go pick up my wedding dress from the laundromat, which was a bonus because it meant I would get to see Betts. Before that, I'll drop off the dogs with Ethel at the Smelly Dog. After I'm finished in town, which reminds me, I need to stop by Dieter's Feed and See to tell Alvin he needs to get all the kayaks up for winter. By now, I was oblivious to the phone tucked between my shoulder and ear, and the fact Hank was on the other end. The more I talked out loud, the longer my to-do list got. After I leave downtown, I'm going to pick up our rings from Lynn. My eyes scanned down the paper. Oh!
What?
Hank asked. We have to meet at the courthouse to get our marriage license. I pulled out the ink pen from the handy-dandy ink pen elastic holder and clicked the top. The marriage license is the most important. I circled the task about 10 times and drew a little heart next to it.
I'll be there. 3 o'clock, right?
Hank asked with a bit of hesitation that sent an alarm off inside me. Yes? Why? What's wrong? I asked.
I got a call from the Slade sheriff. He said they found Keisha Collier's car, and I'm going to drive over there to take a look. I've already contacted her parents, and her father is going to go with me,
he said. Keisha Collier was a 19-year-old woman who went missing a few months ago. The local sheriff had done nothing for the family. And even though Keisha was an adult with a background that wasn't totally on the up and up, her parents insisted something had gone wrong. At least, Hank had told me that about the case after her parents had hired him to locate her. Wow, I said, my jaw dropping. She's been in Slade this entire time? Slade was a town over from Normal, also located in the Daniel Boone National Forest. I'd say Slade was probably the Mac Daddy of caves, caverns, and trails for the region. The famous gorge was located there, and die-hard hikers and spelunkers usually camped in tents right off the trails. It was a far cry from our little trails and town. Slade only had a few shops and really no downtown area to speak of, unlike Normal.
I'm not sure, but we're going to go take a look. Any chance you could meet me earlier?
He asked. I glanced at my to-do list. I'll call you as soon as I get some of my things checked off, and then we can regroup. It was a suggestion I wasn't intending to follow. The wedding was the most important part of this week. Without a marriage license, we wouldn't be able to get married.
We can do it tomorrow.
His words were just words, but they stabbed me in the heart. I gulped.
Mae? Honey, I know this is very important.
My obvious dead silence after his comment about tomorrow must have spoken volumes.
We are getting married. We are getting married in less than 48 hours, and I can't wait to stand there with you and pledge my eternal love.
Now he was just laying it on thick. Still, I listened. But, I had to say, there's a but coming.
But,
he drew the word out in his southern drawl.
It's just a quick drive to look at the car to make sure it's hers. Then we're coming back. Hour and a half tops. If I'm not back by 3, I'll be back in time before they close, which is 5.
He continued to grovel and say very sweet things. I ignored them for the most part and continued to look at tomorrow's schedule. My hair and nails. I didn't want to be running all over God's green earth the day before my wedding, especially since Mother Nature and I had discussed this storm she had brewing our way. I told her she needed to get all the storms, rain, and whatever else she had in store for our little community over with tomorrow and make the weather gorgeous for the big day. It was a done deal, and I knew she would come through for me. After all, it was my wedding. Not only would most of the citizens in Normal attend it, but this was the dream Mary Elizabeth had for me. So getting my hair and nails done was the only appointment tomorrow. That was it. I was going to make a quick stop at the old train station to make sure Cokie didn't need anything, but that was something I could pawn off on Mary Elizabeth to do. Let's just see how the rest of the day goes, and make a decision based on that, I suggested, using Preacher Alex's technique of taking deep breaths when I felt like I could make a very valid argument. What did he know? I thought and shook my head. What unmarried person gives marriage advice? I asked myself.
I'll keep you posted,
Hank said.
This could be what we've been waiting for. Maybe you were right all along.
Let's hope, I said. After Hank had taken Keisha's case and I'd read the file he had compiled for it, I knew from experience how it felt to crawl out of a window as soon as the clock struck midnight on my 18th birthday. Not only did I have enough money from my foster brother, Bobby Ray, to board a Greyhound bus, but I was taking it all the way to New York City, which I didn't leave until a few years ago. Granted, Bobby Ray knew I'd gotten the heck out of Perrysburg, Kentucky, and when they woke up the next morning, Mary Elizabeth was distraught. I never let out a peep about where I was until they saw in the newspapers that I'd married one of the wealthiest businessmen in the country. By the time I'd married Paul, I'd established myself in the city and become a flight attendant. That was how I met Paul, on a flight. I'm not going to lie, he wooed me. He was much older than I was, and he'd lived a full, extravagant life. After we'd married, I'd become a big New York socialite and really put my past behind me. Or so I'd thought. Paul did what Paul did, which I thought was working. Little did I know he was stealing people's money while he was sending me off to the spa, weekend trips, and other places and events I thought I enjoyed. I was blissfully unaware. I wasn't living the day-to-day life back in Kentucky, where I was known as the girl who lost her entire family in a house fire. The poor, pitiful her looks I'd gotten as a child and teenager didn't happen while I lived in New York. And from what I understood to be Keisha's past, I could relate to her all too well. When I'd even mentioned to Hank that Keisha could have simply run off, he poo-pooed the idea because her parents insisted she always came home after running off for a few days. Now it had been months, just like it was with me. When Mary Elizabeth had gotten wind I was back in Kentucky, she showed up. So I guessed Keisha's parents were doing the same thing. My story had turned out for the best, and I couldn't imagine going back to the life I had in New York. Sadly, I wasn't so sure Keisha was turning out for the best. Maybe it would be just the same if they found her. Let's hope so, I finally told Hank, who was saying that I could have been right all along. After catching the time, I said, I'll call you later.
I love you, Mae,
he said in a guilty tone. I love you too, I said, letting him off the hook. Go bring Keisha home. I hung up the phone and let out a heavy sigh as I flipped my binder closed. I put my phone in my purse and grabbed my binder before I headed out the camper van door. Want to go to the spa? I asked my very prissy Fifi, who was used to being pampered and loved it. She was sitting underneath the picnic table, a muddy mess after running around the campground. She'd also taken a big dive into the lake, where she thought she was one with the ducks. They didn't care for her the way she cared for them. Now she bounced to her feet. We need to go get Chester. The mere mention of Hank's dog, who used to be a hunting dog with his original owner, had Fifi darting down the campground toward Hank's fifth wheel. From our new home, I muttered under my breath, and glanced back at my little camper van, which was soon going to be used for a rental. Giving it up made my heart ache a little, but it was the best for us. We'd have a bigger space, and we might move to a brick and mortar eventually. Mary Elizabeth would be so delighted. The thought of her grandchildren growing up in a fifth wheel put her in a tizzy. The thought of having children put me in a tizzy. So I quickly shoved it out of my head. Fifi was waiting at the top step of the fifth wheel by the time I made it. Chester was giving it all he had with his long, low howl on the other side of the door. Hey there, I said as soon as the door popped open and gave him a good scratch. Are you ready to go bye-bye? I had to use different language with Chester. He loved being dirty and all things dirty. If I'd said the word bath, he'd have run into the woods and not come back until dark. Bye-bye was an altogether different word. To him, it meant putting his head out in an open window, and with today's temperatures, that would be heaven for him. Home, sweet home, I said, the warmth of anticipation bubbling in my chest, and decided to take a step inside Hank's fifth wheel. Of course, I knew what it looked like, and had enjoyed many evenings snuggled up on the comfy leather couch, which was fragrant with a subtle touch of musk and aged grace, and much different from the cozy little worn love seat I'd gotten from Buck at the Tough Nickel. As soon as you walked inside, the kitchen's inviting aroma enveloped you. Gleaming marble countertops reflected the soft amber lighting, and the island in the middle boasted an elegant wooden surface surrounded by cherry.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?